October 27, 1962. Deep in the international waters of the Caribbean, the Soviet submarine B-59 is violently shaking from a series of deafening explosions. The U.S. Navy is dropping signaling depth charges to force the submarine to the surface. Inside, the air conditioning has failed, temperatures are pushing 120 degrees, and carbon dioxide levels are now reaching toxic concentrations. Cut off with a dead radio, Captain Valentin Savitsky assumes World War III has already begun. Savitsky gives an order that could end human history. B-59 is carrying a nuclear-tipped torpedo with a yield of 15 kilotons, roughly the same explosive power as the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. He orders his men to prepare the weapon for launch against the American fleet. Soviet naval protocol strictly requires the unanimous consent of the 3 senior officers on board to launch a special weapon. Captain Savitsky votes yes. The political officer votes yes. The fate of hundreds of millions of human lives now hangs on the split-second decision of a single trapped officer. To understand how the globe reached this specific precipice, we have to rewind. By the late 1950s, American corporations controlled 90% of Cuba's mines, 80% of its utilities, and nearly the entire oil industry. While wealth flowed outward to the U.S., the local population faced systemic poverty and widespread disease. Fidel Castro and Che Guevara seized and nationalized that U.S. poverty during the 1959 revolution. In retaliation, the CIA armed 1,500 Cuban exiles to overthrow Castro at the Bay of Pigs, an invasion that collapsed in just 3 days. The Kennedy administration deepened the pressure through Operation Mongoose, directing sabotage and terrorist attacks across the island. The Joint Chiefs even proposed Operation Northwoods, staging fake terror attacks on American soil to justify a full-scale military invasion of Cuba. Nikita Khrushchev watched as the U.S. built a massive nuclear advantage, holding over 5,000 warheads to the Soviets' 300. The U.S. had also positioned Jupiter missiles in Italy and Turkey, placing nuclear weapons directly on the Soviet border. Khrushchev negotiated a secret deal with Castro to level the strategic scales. Operation Anadyr involved the covert shipment of 43,000 troops and 42 nuclear missiles to Cuba to deter the expected American invasion. This long chain of imperial control, covert sabotage, and mutual paranoia backed both superpowers into a corner, far beyond the unprovoked narrative presented to the American public. On October 14, 1962, a U.S. spy plane captured this image of the landscape at Sagua La Grande. CIA analysts identified the specific signatures of an active nuclear base: oxidizer vehicles, erectors on launch pads, and tents housing medium-range ballistic missiles. President Kennedy convened ExComm to debate the response. The Joint Chiefs urged an immediate bombing campaign and land invasion, but Kennedy feared a retaliatory strike on West Berlin. He opted for a naval quarantine to intercept weapons shipments without immediately declaring war. The U.S. military moved to DEFCON 2. 1/8 of the Strategic Air Command's bombers were put on continuous airborne alert, circling with nuclear payloads to ensure the U.S. could strike at a moment's notice. Choosing a blockade bought the world a few hours of time. The tactical friction moved into the open sea, setting the stage for the unpredictable collisions of Black Saturday. By October 27, the situation was spinning out of the hands of the political leaders. Local military units began operating on their own authority. In Cuba, local Soviet commanders tracked a U.S. U-2 plane and, defying orders from Moscow, authorized a surface-to-air missile strike. The plane was destroyed, and Major Rudolf Anderson was killed. ExComm immediately interpreted this as a coordinated escalation from Khrushchev. Convinced an American invasion would arrive within hours, Fidel Castro sent an urgent letter to Khrushchev. He urged the Soviet leader to launch a preemptive nuclear strike against the United States the moment U.S. troops touched Cuban soil. At the same moment, the 3-man vote on board the B-59 submarine reached a deadlock. The flotilla's chief of staff, Vasily Okypov, stubbornly refused to authorize the launch. He argued that the American depth charges were signaling shots and eventually persuaded Captain Savitsky to surface the sub instead of firing. Systemic war protocols were fully active across the globe. Only the independent disobedience of a few individuals prevented automatic nuclear retaliation. As American forces prepared for a Tuesday invasion, official lines of communication failed. Kennedy and Khrushchev reached out through secret emissaries and back channels to find a compromise. Robert Kennedy met privately with Soviet Ambassador Anatoly Dobrynin to negotiate the terms. The Soviets agreed to dismantle their Cuban bases under UN supervision in exchange for a public U.S. pledge never to invade Cuba. To secure the deal, the U.S. made a hidden concession through Operation Pot Pie. Kennedy agreed to quietly dismantle the American Jupiter missiles in Turkey and Italy to balance the strategic scales. Kennedy projected the image of an unyielding victor to the public, masking a balanced compromise that prioritized optics over total transparency. Khrushchev's image was destroyed by the public retreat, leading to his removal from power within 2 years. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, amid lingering hardliner anger over the Cuban Compromise. To prevent another communication failure, the two powers installed a direct teletype line, the Moscow-Washington hotline, to allow instant contact during future crises. Survival in the nuclear age relied on the human courage to choose peace over the momentum of a geopolitical machine spinning toward catastrophe.